The worst part was that I couldn't see where I had gone wrong. My assignment was to write a personal narrative about a major life change, and I had decided to focus on my first week of college. That week had marked one of the most dramatic transitions of my life, and I was sure I could make an engaging story out of it. But 2 nights and 2,000 words later, all I had was an essay that was only slightly more interesting than a deflated soccer ball. Unsure how to improve it, I asked my classmate Emily if she could read my draft and help me come up with a revision plan. The first thing Emily helped me realize was that the scope of my essay was too broad. You describe almost everything that happened in your first week, she said. And that makes your narrative sound more like a list instead of a story. That's probably why you think it's boring. As we talked about it, I came to see that focusing my narrative on a single specific event would help make my essay more engaging. Additionally, our conversation helped me figure out that I spent far too much time telling what happened and not enough time showing. If I included things like dialogue and sensory details in my next draft, I could help readers share my experiences and better understand what I went through. The last thing we talked about, and maybe the most important, was about using the narrative to make a point. Narrative isn't just about telling random stories, Emily said. It's about making meaning out of your experiences. Once you settle on a story, ask yourself what that experience meant to you, and then try to communicate the answer to your readers. By the end of our conversation, I had a revision plan. I still had a lot of work to do, but I felt confident. For the rest of the day, I kept running through that first week in my mind and asking myself questions. Which event should I focus on? Which event meant the most to me? It was when I was in line at the dining hall that I thought of the answer. The ideas were coming so fast that I didn't want to wait until after dinner to start work. I immediately found a table, pulled out my notebook, and began to write. I grew up in South Carolina, and the food there is very different than the food up here. Down south, we love barbecue, pimento cheese, frogmore stew, and grits. I used to have grits every morning. It was my favorite part of the day. They don't have grits up here, though. In the dining hall at breakfast, they have everything else. Oatmeal, cereal, fruit, eggs, bagels, but no grits. My first week here, I was homesick. I missed my family and friends. I felt out of place. And the weather was so different. Other people thought it was mild, but for some reason, I could never get warm. One day, I was desperate for something to cheer me up. And I realized that more than anything, I wanted a bowl of grits. So after classes let out one afternoon, I decided to look for a restaurant that served them. I went all over town. I found restaurants serving every kind of food imaginable, but nobody had any grits. As the sun started to go down, I knew I would have to give up. I wasn't just cold and homesick now. I was also tired and hungry, and I was a long way from campus. As I walked towards school, I passed a diner. There weren't any customers inside, just a man wiping the counter. When I sat down, he handed me a menu. I asked if I could have a turkey club, and when he heard my accent, he got all excited. "Where are you from?" he asked. His voice was pure Carolina. I was thrilled. We talked about the South for a while, and I told him about looking for grits. "We don't sell those," he said, "but I'll be right back with your food." 15 minutes went by with no sign from him. I started to get annoyed, but he was nice, and I didn't want to walk out. When he finally came out, he wasn't carrying a sandwich. He had a big bowl. All of a sudden, the restaurant smelled like my mother's kitchen. I was stunned. "I thought you said you didn't have them," I said. He smiled again. "I said we didn't sell them, but I make them for myself a lot, and it isn't any trouble to mix up a batch." As hungry as I was, I didn't dive in right away. I just looked at him. For a moment, I was back home. I took off my jacket. For the first time all week, I felt warm.